If you're anything like me, and God help you if you are, you spend an unconscionable amount of your downtime browsing weird graphics cards on AliExpress. Every now and again, something pops up on my radar that's weird enough to be fascinating, but not fascinating enough to warrant spending the better part of $1,000 on. Thankfully, I have viewers who are far less risk-averse than I am. This video is sponsored by AliExpress and their 15th anniversary cashback challenge. Claim at least 5% cashback on physical items like graphics cards just by joining the Iceberg tech team, either by typing Iceberg into the AliExpress app's search bar or using the QR code on screen now. The bigger the team grows and the more we spend, the bigger the cashback amount grows, up to a maximum of 15%, which can then be redeemed against your next purchase from AliExpress. The more you buy, the more you save. On top of that, up until the end of March, you can use my discount codes on screen to claim up to £35 discount instantly off your purchase. Oh, and the AliExpress 15th anniversary sale starts on the 16th at 11 PM UK time, where you can enjoy discounts of up to 80%, so that might be a good time to go shopping. The app also features games like Prizeland, where you can earn endless coupons and high-value prizes, plus you can win a share of £800,000. So, despite that little sponsor spot there, I need to preface this video with a disclaimer. I know it's a rough time for new graphics cards right now, especially in the mid to high end, but when you see an RTX 4090 for sale from a brand you've never heard of for about £1,000, don't buy it. Seriously, if ever a video of mine warranted an entertainment and education purposes only warning, this is it. This is a Sejishi RTX 4090M, available for sale on sites like AliExpress for around £1,100 sterling. It has 16GB of RAM, which isn't a lot for this price, but it is a Geforce we're talking about. It has a PCIe interface, the usual array of video outputs. To all intensive purposes, it looks like a normal graphics card. Of course, if you've given it more than a cursory glance, you'll have noticed that extra letter on the end of the model number. You may recall a video of mine from a while back about the RTX 3080 Ti Mobile that had been shoehorned into a desktop graphics card. That card was provided by a viewer called Alexi, who contacted me again a few weeks ago about this 4090M. I'd seen it before, but hadn't been brave enough to buy it myself, so I have to offer him a huge thanks for making this video possible. This Frankensteined GPU is a similar story to the last one. Enterprising engineers somewhere in Asia found themselves in possession of a quantity of high-end mobile GPUs, which they then decided to solder onto PCBs and slap generic heatsinks on top of. We'll come back to the heatsink in a bit, but the GPU is the interesting part. This version of the AD103 chip was intended as a mobile GPU, but it's still desktop grade. It's not the same as a desktop 4090, however, and is in fact closer to the 4080 in terms of CUDA cores, tensor cores, TMUs and ROPs. It also has 16GB of VRAM, like the 4080, and unlike the 24GB 4090, but it's the slower GDDR6 rather than the usual 6X, so even with the best power delivery and cooling possible, we're looking at somewhere below desktop 4080 performance. The supplied cooler is not the best possible, however, being very compact and lightweight despite what we'd normally expect from an Ada Lovelace generation GPU. Mobile GPUs are usually configured for lower TDP operation, so even this basic heatsink is generous compared to the average gaming laptop. Despite the decent-sized chunk of aluminium, the folks who put this together decided, in their wisdom, that it didn't need fan speed control. The 4090M is therefore being cooled by two fans operating at a fixed speed, which makes them somewhat audible over the 7 other case fans in the system even at idle, and yet aren't quite enough to keep temps in check in a combustor stress test. With the stock thermal paste applied, the GPU hit the high 80s, and that started to cause performance problems. This was resolved with some MX4, but I can't help but think that being able to crank up the fans would have helped. But that's not all. Once again, this is not an official Nvidia product, nor was it made with their approval, so drivers are an issue. The GPU won't be recognised by the official Nvidia driver package, so as with the last mobile-derived graphics card I tested, I had to buy and download the third-party Franken driver instead. To be clear, there's no reason to put yourself in this situation. Even if you can't find a real 4090 or even a 4080 for anywhere near this price, you can probably get a 5070 Ti for the same or a 9070 XT for less. And they all use official drivers. The best case scenario when relying on third-party drivers is that the developer eventually gives up making them because it stops being worth their time, or because they get hit with a cease and desist by Nvidia. The worst case scenario is that the driver package turns out to be malware. So, buyer beware. Given the last two Nvidia GPUs I've reviewed, there really isn't a lot to say about the 4090M's performance. It's within margin of error of the RTX 5070, just without all those Blackwell benefits like, come back to me on that one. KCD2 averages 96 FPS at 1440p, so should probably be good for a 60 plus experience at 4K, without the need for DLSS. Meanwhile, we're back up in 5070 territory in Spider-Man 2, with the average at 1440p hitting 90 FPS without ray tracing or upscaling, and 80 FPS with them both enabled. Avowed has a bug that forces upscaling even when it's disabled, and in order to get the native resolution numbers, I had to disable and enable them again. No doubt DLSS will give better performance and won't sacrifice much in terms of quality, but nevertheless I like to know how these games do without upscaling. In this case, not bad, but not great. At the Epic preset we're just short of 60 FPS. Turning on Full RT only has a 2 FPS impact on the 4090M, but a 0 FPS impact on the 5070. Again, possibly some kind of bug. The 4090M does fix one big flaw that plagues all of the mainstream RTX alternatives: the VRAM. Without Full RT enabled, Indiana Jones is performing at about the same 90 FPS level as the 5070, only using the Supreme preset rather than Very Ultra. With Full RT cranked to max, it's now about 10% above the 5070, except the 12GB card needed quality dropping to high to get there without crashing. Meanwhile, with 16GB to hand, the 4090M can do all this at Supreme. On the other hand, there's no substitute for optimization. Veilguard clearly likes the 50 series architecture better than the 40 series, and the 5070's lead in the non-RT testing extends to almost 15% with RT and DLSS. Horizon Forbidden West is, again, within margin of error of the 5070, capable of over 90 FPS on average, and the 1% lows don't really seem to benefit from the extra VRAM. The story is the same in God of War Ragnarok, only now the average is over 100 FPS at 1440p Ultra. Another game that benefits from the extra VRAM is Star Wars Outlaws, although less in terms of frame rates and more in flexibility. I was able to get the same FPS at high as the 5070 achieved at medium, and in the RT benchmark, with equal settings across both cards, that translated into about 10 to 14% better performance. Onto Black Myth Wukong, and at 1440 high without Full RT, we're just over 80 FPS. Adding path tracing and quality DLSS, and we're only just short of the 60 mark. Cyberpunk passes 100 FPS at the regular Ultra preset, and at RT Ultra with DLSS-Q, it's still reaching into the 80s, which actually puts it about 10% ahead of the 5070. Alan Wake 2 has a small lead over the 5070 at 1440 high, bringing it closer to the Magic 60 while still not quite getting there. With path tracing and DLSS enabled, the margin extends to 25%, which is quite a result considering. Finally, Marvel Rivals can happily run at 110 FPS with screen space, global illumination and reflections, and changing them to the RT versions drops that average down to below 90. Those ray trace numbers are a little better than the 5070, but not by much. Out of the box, the 4090M is a very expensive, somewhat flawed product, and despite its performance, 99% of people are better off putting their money towards something more conventional, with a warranty and official drivers, and pulse width modulation. If you're a tinkerer, I think there's a lot to work with here. This is kicking out 4070 Super performance at just over 100 watts, and there's more power being supplied from the PCIe connectors than the GPU knows what to do with. Given some dedicated liquid cooling and a modified BIOS, this thing could be a low-key beast. I am not a tinkerer, at least not at the level I'd need to be to get the most out of it, so while I'm glad I got to play with the 4090M, I'm also glad it didn't cost me over $1,000 to do so. Thanks again to Alexi for loaning me the 4090M, and thanks again to AliExpress for sponsoring the video. Don't forget to check out the discount codes on screen now, and join the Iceberg tech team to start earning cash back. Thanks for watching, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.